Welcome to A Girl, a Guy, and a Buffy podcast. I'm one of your hosts. I'm Charles Swint.
And I'm your other co-host, Kate Balzer.
And we are two friends here who've been watching Buffy since the beginning. We're not a rewatch podcast, but we explore the big bad themes of the show. This podcast is chock full of spoilery goodness, so if you have not watched the entire series, don't want to be spoiled, then press pause now.
Hey everyone, welcome to this special bonus episode. Super excited to have a previous guest back, and I'd like to welcome back Jenna Gould, who is a licensed clinical social worker and therapist. And she joined us at the end of the first half of season 3, where we discussed romantic relationships in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And as we wrap up the second half of season 3, having talked about friendships and familiar relationships, we've got Jenna back to give us her perspective as a therapist on the relationships amongst the friends and family in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So welcome back, Jenna.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me back. I'm very excited to be here.
We're so glad to have you back. And again, please remind our listeners about your background and your experience and the focus of your practice.
Sure. So, as Kate said, I'm a licensed social worker and I work in private practice in Atlanta. I work with LGBTQ plus communities, adult children of emotionally immature parents, and a lot of issues around perfectionism and people pleasing. I am attachment informed and I really love working around how people show up in relation to one another.
So you can see why Jenna is perfect for this discussion. You might recognize a few of those topics within the show and the characters' relationships.
Just a little bit.
So moving into our discussion about the family and friend relationships in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Jenna, how would you define a healthy family familial relationship?
Yeah, I think healthy relationships start with being able to communicate and respect boundaries, and that extends to family relationships as well. I think also something that we might touch on later is in terms of like a parent-child relationship, you want to see parents who are actually taking on the responsibilities of parenting.
Mm.
And I mean, I see a lot of things through an attachment kind of lens, which I know we've talked about before. And that's really important in family relationships because our earliest relationships really serve as a model for how we relate to one another. So if you have a parent who is secure and taking on the appropriate responsibilities that come along with parenthood, then that's gonna help set up children for having healthy relationships themselves.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I can already see the lack of that in multiple areas of the show.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
For sure. So that kind of gives us an idea of like already looking at these relationships of how unhealthy I guess they really are, with lack of boundaries, with lack of communication, and I think with lack of understanding the roles
Mm.
that people are supposed to, how you're supposed to show up and like the roles that you have to play in these relationships. They're all a little bit skewed.
They are, and I think for good reason. Buffy very much takes on the world on her shoulders, and that's a responsibility that extends into all areas of her life. And we even see that in later seasons with Dawn. She really plays more of a parent role to Dawn than a sibling. Um, and I think a big part of that, it's hard to downplay having just the enormous responsibility that comes with being a Slayer. And how do you just be a kid when that you can't compartmentalize your life in that way? You can't just be a Slayer and then be done for the day. And the apocalypse is not going to come until I clock in tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And she tries so hard to do that. I mean, like the
Yeah, it's
first
true.
season, she tried really hard. I just want to be a normal girl. I just want to do this. And then, I want to like go to the mall, date boys and save the world from unspeakable dangers. I want to do girly stuff. Like she's just trying to be the most normal version, or at least normalize her new reality as much as possible.
Yeah, and she gets criticized for it too. It's something that makes her different from other Slayers. I mean, especially, when we meet Kendra, that's a very stark kind of comparison. And Giles brings this up a lot too. Like, it's like, oh, you're not like other Slayers, you're not like other girls. She she really tries to carve out her own kind of childhood and adolescence, and that's just really impossible with the responsibilities that she has. She grows up very quickly, and she's 15, right, when she's first
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
called. Oh, that's still a child.
Ooh,
I
think
mean,
about
she's
who I was at 15. Ugh.
yeah, I mean, she's just a freshman in high school. You're barely out of your preteens.
Yeah, yeah, so it makes sense why she really takes on that role, and extends it to everyone too, like she takes that role on with her friends and with her family, and very much is the caretaker. And when adolescents are taking on those responsibilities earlier than they should have, that has implications for how you continue to form relationships and how you show up with other people.
Yeah, absolutely. And she's also taking on this like heavier responsibility that adults with more years of emotional experience, emotional development struggle with. So like doing it at 16, you can only imagine. It's not surprising that she really shuts down. Like her response to a lot of that is to keep going and push through it, but really also shut down at the same time.
Yeah, because what other choice does she have?
Yeah.
Well, and it feels like all of like this is her coping mechanism is to try to compartmentalize as much as
Hmm.
possible because it like that's her coping skill, it seems like. But and it's interesting, this just came to mind like when they always say, well, you're not like other Slayers. When the truth of the matter is no two Slayers are alike, and we saw that. Like we see that each one of them was different. I mean, maybe there was some that were more disciplined, but the ones that we kind of saw in the show were definitely not the same. I'm sure, Slayers weren't supposed to get pregnant and have children, but Nikki did.
Hmm.
Faith was a complete wild card. And then if you just look at the swath of potentials that were there, who knows what any one of those could have been like.
Yeah, I imagine in my head early on, with the first Slayer and even the first couple generations of Slayers, it's kind of there's a kind of militance that I imagine that they took on, really being cut off from their family, not having friends. I'm imagining kind of very earlier versions of Kendra where
Hmm.
they're really encouraged to distance themselves from their humanity and kind of just be fighting machines.
Yeah, and when you think about it too, if you go back, centuries and millennia, and you think about it, unless the new Slayer came from a very wealthy or well-known family because they were, maybe their family were leaders in the village or whatever, it was probably a lot easier to take a young girl away from her family, especially if it was a financial burden and it was presented as like, oh, this, I'm sure it was mostly male watchers were taking her and be like, oh, we're going to give her an education, but she has to come with us and basically you'll never see her again. I'm sure that was very easy to do and basically everywhere around the world,
Hmm.
no matter what country or culture you were in.
Yeah, the Watchers Council has showed us time and time again that they really don't care about the Slayers.
No.
Yeah,
So true.
just another resource, just another weapon to use.
Yeah. I mean, if they cared, obviously there would be a million things they do differently. They would give her a team. They would, maybe even like find other potential slayers and have them work together. They would give them a salary. You
Pay
know,
her.
They would pay her.
they would pay her. Yeah, this is not some like just some sacred calling. Like, why do the men get paid and the young girls do not?
Right. This is
Yeah.
I should get called for my sacred pay, like, or paid for my sacred calling.
Yes.
You chose to do this. Like, what is going on? Like, watchers like volunteer and study to do this. Like, I got plucked. That's not
Hmm.
fun.
Yeah, priests take salaries, and
Hmm.
that's a sacred calling.
Yep,
Right. See,
absolutely.
not fair at all.
Yeah. Damn the patriarchy.
So Jenna, as a therapist, what's your take on like the idea of biological and chosen family relationships in the series?
I think that chosen family plays a really big role. I mean, it's pretty obvious that the Scoobies are Buffy's chosen family, and I love how central that is to the show. Like that's what makes up the heart of the show. Um, and as someone who works primarily with queer folks and who is queer, I think that just really resonates with me. The theme of chosen family being so important. I'm also thinking about the episode with where Tara's family,
Mm.
where Amy Adams makes an appearance.
Yeah.
Uh, and again, kind of hitting home the theme of chosen family. And I may have said this last time we talked, but Buffy's coming out to her mom as a Slayer to me really echoes a queer coming out story. And
Hmm.
her mom is basically like, if you leave, don't come back. And so she doesn't. And she has to kind of build her own family, build her own community because at least in the beginning, it's something that she can't disclose to her biological family.
Yeah. I always wonder like what would have happened had Hank found out. Like how he would have responded, what he would have done if he ever knew what was really going on.
I can't imagine it would have gone well. He he's a pretty shit dad.
Yeah, I mean, it's just very absentee.
Yeah.
Uh,
And I also wonder how intentional that was.
Hmm.
yeah.
Because at least in the beginning, it seemed like he has much more of a presence. And they had the same actor play him a few times. And I wonder if it was sort of a budgetary call or just like a casting call that they were just not going to keep having someone come back. So I also kind of wonder that storyline would have looked like if I don't know, it had been a little bit more intentional. Um, because at least like, after they sort of phase out Hank, Joyce is the only family that Buffy has until, season 5. And I also want to give Joyce the benefit of the doubt. I mean, being a single parent and a single mother is really difficult, and she made the decision to uproot Buffy and move to a different school system, to a different city to give her another chance, and also had to sacrifice her business. Like owning an art gallery is not something that is easily movable.
Hmm.
Hmm.
So I don't I don't really think, Joyce is necessarily doing anything wrong either.
Right.
Yeah, that's where, and Charles and I have had these conversations in previous episodes, but where it can be a little frustrating where the reality of the series does a disservice to the character development. So the fact that basically they probably partly gave Joyce the job she has so that she's forced to travel a lot because she's obviously going around looking for pieces to sell in her gallery, which makes it easier because she's not there. So then Buffy can do what she needs to do, but then it kind of makes her look like a bad parent, but you're like, is she really? Again, the Jessica Rabbit thing, as we always say, or is she just written that way? And the same with Hank. Like, did it just become logistically unfeasible to have her dad around popping up every so often? So they kind of basically wrote him out and wrote some bad things about him being a bad, a selfish husband who had at least one, if not multiple affairs. And then, post-divorce, basically got caught up in his own new life. So he abandoned his daughter, then daughters, when Dawn comes into the picture. So it can be frustrating because it'd be one thing if they like really did that purposefully, and then that would be interesting to explore as a character. But sometimes, like, it just sort of being the default because logistics in real life got in the way is a little disappointing.
And
Yeah, sorry, go ahead,
no,
Charles.
go ahead. I was just thinking too, and do you want to do like because he doesn't know, like do you want to keep when you bring him back, do you want to keep doing like these episodes where like Hank's in town and wacky hijinks ensue as Buffy and the Scooby Gang try to hide her identity from her dad?
Yeah,
You
yeah, good
know,
point. Yeah.
like it feels less of service to the show.
Yeah, you can only do that episode so many times before
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
becomes stale.
Yeah. Again, like an interesting potential use of his character could have been, oh, can't speak, would have been having him come back in season 6 and step up when Giles leaves, and maybe something happened in his life and he's, sort of regretting the abandonment of his family. So he's stepping up now. I mean, that was just like a potential they could have done with the storyline.
That's true. And the fact that he just continues to be absent in season
Hmm.
6, like when Joyce dies and
Hmm.
Buffy's left to pay the bills. What about what about child support?
Hmm.
hmm Yeah, it's always weird to me that he is so like completely absent from it. And like and again, like you said, like it doesn't make sense that he is so absolutely absent that his ex-wife passes away, leaving behind, in his mind, two children,
Hmm.
and he is nowhere. Not a phone call, not a like there's like who doesn't come back for that?
Yeah, maybe it would have made season 6 a little less dark to have the support of another parent there. Um, but this, having logistics affect the characters' arcs and story development also, I think, is a big part of the Giles Buffy conflict in
Hmm.
season
hmm
6, and why, we know Anthony Stewart Head wanted to go back to England and be close to his family, which I get that for him.
Yeah.
And it also, to me, didn't make a whole lot of sense with Giles' track record in relation to Buffy just being like, I think you're good with all the things that you're going through, and I'm going to go back to England now, actually.
You're an adult now. You can take care of yourself.
Right.
Yeah. You
You're
don't need me anymore, especially not as a watcher with my years of experience and PhDs or research or
I get that your mother just died less than a year ago,
yeah.
and
And you were resurrected.
and you were dead and then brought back to life. But it's fine. You're an adult now. You can take care of it. You can take care of yourself. Or at least you got to learn how. I mean, again, getting kicked out of the house again. Like it's just like I don't know. Yeah, logistics interfering with
Storytelling.
storytelling.
Yeah.
And kind of yeah, and some of the work yeah, I don't know. There could have been a better excuse for him to leave
a 100%.
than
Yeah.
I
you're an adult now.
I definitely blame the writers for that in season 6 because
Hmm.
I just didn't buy it. I don't buy that for Giles just upping and going home, going back to England
Like
for
he could have had a family emergency. Like something in his family could have been falling apart that he needed to take care of or
right.
something.
and he barely, I mean, I think they speak on the phone a couple times, but it's like they have to call him for some emergency. I just don't buy as Giles him disappearing and mostly cutting off all contact with Buffy.
Yeah,
Yeah, and the fact that like they couldn't even get him back to come for Xander and Anya's wedding. He's a business partner with Anya, and he left her the store, and
right.
he's known Xander since he was 16. Like, really? You're not going to show up for their wedding?
Yeah.
So speaking of parents, switching back to Joyce and Buffy, in the Joyce Buffy relationship, who do you think serves as the mother role? So this kind of relates to what you were saying earlier about, the parent stepping up as a parent. Do you think there was any role reversal or conflict in the role in that relationship between them?
There's definitely a role reversal there. I think Buffy really does take on the parent, the mother role there. In the first couple of seasons, she's protecting her identity while also trying to protect Joyce from harm. And it comes off very much as a caretaking sort of role to me, um, because she is quite literally trying to protect Joyce and keep her alive.
Hmm.
Uh, and we sometimes see small moments where they have what seems like a normal mother daughter interaction, where Joyce does seem to be more of the parent, but I think that's more the exception than the rule.
And do you think so? Kind of, going back to your experience and the type of clients you work with, looking at the Joyce Buffy role, do you think they would have that reverse relationship if Buffy wasn't a Slayer? Do you think that really is the only thing that drives that, or do you think there's more to that role reversal than just Buffy being the Slayer?
I think it's Buffy being the Slayer.
Hmm.
Because in those moments, I mean, it's clear Joyce very much cares about Buffy and wants to care for her like a child. When I mentioned emotionally immature parents, and in my intro about
Hmm.
myself, like I work with adult children of emotionally immature parents, and that sometimes that means that one parent is an alcoholic or addict, or narcissist, or has a severe mental illness where they're just really not capable and able to take on the responsibilities of a parent, to give children what they need when they are
Hmm.
younger, to give them that sense of security and comfort. And a lot of times there's a role reversal there uh, where folks who are not capable of showing up as a parent are asking their kids to take care of them. Like, for example, if you have a parent that's an alcoholic and they're constantly coming home drunk, then often what happens is the kid steps up and is physically caring for the parent, taking on some of the responsibilities that the parent is letting fall through the cracks. Um, I mean, really just kind of picking up the pieces. And that's when you tend to see that real kind of role reversal. And Joyce, I think Joyce demonstrates that she has the capacity to be a parent to a, let's say, normal in air quotes
Hmm.
kid, a kid who's not a Slayer.
Right.
uh, so I think that really it is because Buffy is the Slayer that she ends up taking the world on her shoulders and trying to protect her family and her friends and everyone else.
Yeah, for me, I remember one of the moments that most stood out, even on first watch, but definitely on rewatches is and I think we've talked about this before, but when Joyce finds the dead children in gingerbread and she just has such a like almost childlike reaction, and Buffy like feels so much like a parent in that moment. And it's not even a normal like kid, trying to comfort their mom during this horrible thing. It's like Buffy's level of experience. It really is a role reversal. It's so stark because it's so very weird to watch. Almost like uncomfortable just because you're like, this is not the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the emotional aspect of taking on that parenting, that caretaking sort of role, because the emotional attunement is a really big part of it, and something that's really, really crucial that can sometimes be hard to put words to is that parents are providing emotional attunement for their
Mhm.
when they're not, that leaves kids confused, constantly trying to guess how someone's going to show up. And that can be a part too with emotionally immature parents where you don't know what version of mom is going to show up. So
Mhm.
you're constantly on alert and scanning and really trying to assess. And so in that example, the kid is really, really not able to attune to themselves because they're so busy trying to figure out how parent is going to show up.
Mhm.
Mhm. Yeah, it's interesting too because when you think about all of those times that Joyce doesn't show up, sort of as an like as an emotionally mature parent, I mean, some of it I think comes from just like the lack of not knowing what's going on, and being in the dark about it, and then other times it feels like, well, because this is a mystical thing, and so like something mystical has happened that now Joyce is sort of incapacitated in some form, like in Gingerbread or like in Band Candy, where she's not able to sort of be aware, where she becomes the immature one and is it's forcing Buffy to be the parent, out of a mystical circumstance as opposed to it being, alcohol or drugs or some other mental impairment.
Yeah, there's kind of a harsh reality. It's a hard transition when she comes back in season 3, and for the first time her mom knows who she is and what she does. At least she has an idea of what she does, but
Mm.
she doesn't really know until things happen here or there. Her boyfriend is a robot. She turns into a high schooler because of band candy. these these small, like you said, Charles, mystical things that happen. Um, I imagine it must have been really scary for her the more that she found out about what Buffy does and
Mhm.
the reality of being a Slayer, because she must realize at some point and really internalize the fact that she can't protect Buffy.
Right.
Buffy's doing the
Mhm.
protecting.
Right. Buffy is the one doing all the protecting. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Gosh, yeah. Poor Joyce, man. She had a, I mean, she kind of had it rough. She never, I mean, I think she did her level best, especially after she found out. Like she really tried to be supportive, especially when Faith comes around and all of that stuff. She tries to sort of get on board and be a supportive parent. But there's just no way that she can truly know.
Yeah, and I think too, I mean, because she finds out so late into the high school years that there's no way really before Buffy, graduates and is off to college, and that relationship was going to change anyway, even if she wasn't a Slayer and went off to college, that there's no way she doesn't really ever figure out how to balance the fact of like in slaying, Buffy really has to be the leader. She has to do things that you wouldn't let a normal teenager, if you were being a good, parent, would let your teen do, but she has to. But at the same time, you still have to figure out how to parent her, particularly, I think emotionally. And so yeah, poor Joyce, she just basically never gets the chance to figure out that balance, if there is any sort of balance to figure out.
It's interesting to think about. Joyce is a character I have so much affection for. I love
Mhm.
Joyce. I get so excited when seeing her for the first time in season 1 with her weird short hair
Yes.
and I also love Christine Sutherland,
hmm
who plays her. She just, I think, gives a lot of depth to Joyce in a role that maybe another actor wouldn't have been able to do.
hmm
We're not given a whole lot to start out with, and if this is a character that I know I'm not the only one who loves Joyce, that we have collectively a lot of affection for, that the actor is doing something really well.
hmm
Yeah, it's very well cast. I mean, to bring her on and to have her to be she has such a nurturing spirit about her anyway, just like as a person, it seems like that is like that part is coming through on screen. And so I mean, she has such a difficult role to play in this universe, playing sort of the, quote unquote, for lack of a better word, like the straight man in this world, being like the only person who doesn't really know what's going on for so long and being sort of left in the dark, but still having to be, a nurturer and a provider. And I think it's interesting too, Kate, what you were saying that like after a certain point, we really don't see Joyce parenting
hmm
after she finds out. Like we get less and less of those moments of Joyce being a parent and Joyce trying to set boundaries for all of that stuff because all the boundaries, like everything she's known as a parent, has just gone out the window. And she has to like, she spent all of season 1 and 2 like reading parenting books and trying to like establish these, healthy boundaries and all this other stuff. When at the end of the day, the whole like her whole world sort of falls apart and she has to make up her own rules about how to be a good parent.
Yeah, it really comes to like a culmination in Band Candy because obviously that's what's happening in Band Candy. They're overscheduling Buffy because they're both, just trying to both, I think, control her from her actions when she ran away, but also like as a way to show their love and concern, meaning Joyce and Giles. But obviously they overcorrect and go too far to the other direction. And it was kind of after that. And I think when Joyce again gets to really see Buffy in action, to take down the demon and save the babies that were going to be fed to the demon, that it kind of is like after that, Buffy, she just kind of is like, okay, my daughter's, grown up and she has this role that no other kid in the world has. And so I think she's just kind of like, okay, I gotta let her do what she's doing.
It's not like you can ground her and be like, you're
Right,
grounded, go to
exactly.
your room.
Exactly. When she literally says it's the end of the world, it means it's the end of the world.
Right. I'm
As
sorry,
she
you
tried to
can't
tell
go
her in
outside.
season one. Yeah.
She tried grounding her before she knew.
hmm
Yeah,
Buffy was always sneaking out of that one window in her bedroom.
Yep.
right. Which again, sorry, Joyce. Like, come on. Her window is like right there on the like right there with the awning. Like, come on, she's gonna sneak out of that. You should have known better about that.
Yeah, apparently she needed to put bars on both the bedrooms because Dawn found her way out too.
Oh yeah. Oh my goodness.
Well, shifting direction away from family, and discussing the friendships on the show, what makes a good friend?
I think just kind of like I said about family relationships, good friendships are made up of being able to communicate and maintain healthy boundaries and being able to respect them. Um, Someone who's gonna help be there for you to catch the pieces when you fall and encourage you when you need some propping up. But I think in terms of, I think to distinguish codependent or kind of enmeshed friendships from healthier friendships, the boundary piece and the communication pieces, those are the big two that are really important. Because we also can't read minds, and
Mm.
we need to be able to tell people what we need and how we feel, because it's not our friends' jobs to try to figure out what we need.
Mm,
Yeah.
yes. So when we're talking about so then it makes me wonder, and I guess I mean we sort of talked about this, Kate, but I'm curious to Jenna, what do you think? Were they good friends? Were the Scoobies good friends?
Yes, they're not perfect, but no one is. Everyone's human. I think when they're at their best is when they're really showing up for each other when they most need it. And when they're at their worst is when they're engaging in avoidance and just not communicating. Um, I mean, Dead Man's Party is on the mind since I just watched it. And that's the whole episode. I'm like, okay, you're all holding resentments and none of you are talking to each other. And even when Buffy kind of says, "Hey, it seems like you're avoiding me or upset with me," and Willow, love Willow, but she is just the classic people pleaser. She's
Mm.
like, "No, nothing's wrong," and then continues to avoid.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And I think that's kind of when they're at their worst, when they're just not communicating with each other. And that's also when resentment starts to build up, when we're not communicating what's going on inside, we're not letting each other know what we need, and it all kind of comes to a head either in some sort of, I mean, usually in some sort of explosive way. On Buffy, certainly in a way where it's like they're in the middle of trying to fight the enemy, and then they're also yelling at each other about, uh, you know, what's up with you being called Nighthawk, Xander?
Nighthawk, gross.
Yeah, I also think Xander's a real jerk in that episode.
I feel like that's a common thing you could say about Xander in those high school years.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Not just high school.
I think he grows up more than you think he does in those later seasons. I mean, he has a lot of work to do, but I don't know, at least from my perspective, but
I mean, he's maybe not as much of a tool, but he
yeah.
definitely has his moments.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. As we have
Right.
dissected multiple times for sure.
So, Jenna, who do you think is Buffy's best friend? Like, of the Scoobies, who shows up as sort of her best friend?
For me, it's Willow.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think something that complicates the relationship between Buffy and Xander from season one, kind of from the get go, is the fact that he doesn't want her as a friend, and he
Mhm.
Hmm.
he has this idea that he's been friend zoned, where he really wants more than that. So, and I think to your earlier point, Kate, where he does do some growing after high school. I think part of it is that we kind of get over that hump
Mhm.
of Xander constantly reminding us that he doesn't want Buffy as a friend and he resents that she is dating other men. Uh, and and so he doesn't really show up for her as a friend in a lot of the early seasons.
Hmm.
And
Yeah. I'm doing
Willow,
snaps.
Yeah.
and Willow, for the most part, does.
Yeah. I would agree with that.
Yeah.
We were in our previous episode, our final main episode for this season, just, which would have just come out, we discussed the friendships in the series. And for me, not only do I agree with you about Willow and Buffy really being there for each other and each other's best friends, it always felt like an incredibly authentic girlfriend relationship.
Hmm.
It didn't feel most of the, I would say ever for myself at least, based on my own, and I'm someone who grew up with like girlfriends my whole life. So like I've always been close to like had close girlfriends in my life. So it's very natural relationship for me. But it never felt like TV friendship. It always felt like, oh, I could see these two people walk off the page into real life and it would feel, yes, like that looks like a friendship I recognize.
Yeah, I think you're right. I also have always had close friendships with other women, and it does feel really authentic. It's not surface level.
Hmm.
I think it, for the most part, passes the Bechdel test. They're
Yeah.
not,
Yeah.
relationship is not all about boys and who they're dating. And it also, like, over the arc from season 1 to 7, it's one where as they are growing, so their relationship is also changing, and they're
Hmm.
Yeah.
also maturing. And relationships, I like to think of them as their own entity. Like, it's not just the two people in it. It's kind of, relationships are their own separate living thing. And so they're going to grow and change just like we do as humans. And I think that's something we really see with Willow and Buffy, that their friendship doesn't stay the same. And
Hmm.
I'm also thinking about when Willow comes out to Buffy and tells
Hmm.
her she's gay. That is such a beautiful moment,
Yeah.
where at first, Buffy is, she's trying to digest it in real time, and you see it, and she's like, "That's great, Will.
Right.
Yeah,
That's
she keeps saying her
great,
name.
Right.
Will."
Will.
Saying her name, and Willow's like, "You're freaking out," and she's like, "I'm sorry. I don't want to be freaking out. It's just, I'm just digesting, and it's different." And I think that's really telling about the nature of their relationship and their friendship.
Yeah. And there's also too like there's a lovely moment to sort of talk about the evolution of their relationship in season 5, Tough Love. Like once, there is this tension that's happening between them about, taking care of Dawn and the pressures and all of that stuff, and Buffy feeling the pressure of having to take care of Dawn, and then and Willow not understanding that, and that causing some tension between the two of them. But then when Tara gets her mind, you know, sucked by Glory, like at the end of that episode, they're all sitting there on the bed, and there's this understanding, and there's this like look of, when she's like, I can take care of this, I can do this, and Buffy's like, I know you can, and they have this sort of moment of understanding each other again, and like coming back and seeing each other. And to me, it's such a great moment. It's just such a lovely moment of like, I understand you, you understand me, and I've got you in this moment too. Like we can support each other through this really, really difficult time because everything is different now.
Yeah, that's a really good example. I also think, I was just thinking one that doesn't get discussed all that much is also when Buffy steps up for Willow after she goes on that magic OD with Rack and drives the car and gets Dawn hurt. And yet she still takes her in and helps her. I mean, especially she got Dawn hurt. She did the one thing that like Buffy strives to prevent from happening, whether it's reasonable or not, but is to keep Dawn completely safe. And yet, I mean, she rightly could have kicked her out and said, you need to go to your parents for help. You need to go to Xander for help. Like, I can't do it right now. Plus, I'm suffering through my own depression and trying to get back into life after, being in heaven and resurrected. And yet she doesn't. She's still there for Willow in that moment.
And I wonder too, is that like speaking of that moment, like how much of that like is that being that it's a good question because I debate on that in my head. Is that being a good friend or is that just not being able to set a good boundary? Because here's somebody who is going through something but has hurt the person that you were supposed to take care of. Is it like having her in the house with her? Does that like at what point like that feels like a really interesting like area to be like, am I setting the right boundary for protecting Dawn versus having Willow in the house because, like you said, there are other people that she could have gone to. Like she could have stayed with Xander. She could have gone to her parents, but instead she chose to bring her in the house. Was that the right choice? I mean, clearly she made it, but
I'm trying to remember. Doesn't she set some consequences?
Well, they get rid of like everything magical in
Yeah,
the house. Candles, herbs, because Dawn gets all pissy about it, and that's when the social worker shows up. So it's the episode she turns invisible. Um, and I guess they kind of make her go to like the magic version of addicts,
yeah, she's
magic
gone to.
addicts anonymous or whatever. Or alcoholics anonymous. I was trying to say. But other than that, and they just basically tell her to quit cold turkey, which I'm not saying they like give her the right advice, but that's what I remember from
Yeah,
how they handle the situation.
there really aren't any consequences, and there's no like, and if you do use magic again, then you'll have to leave. There's nothing that's stated that that's even an option.
yeah, this is where the magic addiction metaphor
Yeah.
starts to unravel.
Yeah.
Yeah. My comment on Buffy being a good friend is takes out of consideration a good or bad story.
Right. That's true. Yeah.
There are issues with how they handle that storyline, but that being said, um, you know, I get what you're saying. I don't think there is a right answer. And I mean, to be fair, in some ways, it's not really the first time Willow has messed up. It's just been what we think at first is rock bottom. And so I can understand like Buffy willing to give her that first
Mm,
chance.
yeah.
Um, and she may also just be thinking, even though she hurt Dawn, it's not something she would expect Willow normally to do. And Buffy's kind of in a tight place anyway. She still needs help with Dawn.
Yeah,
She
that's
needs
true.
help at the house, so it's kind of like Buffy's also in her own between a rock and a hard place as well.
Yeah, and it's not an intentional hurt, for
Right.
sure. So like it's not
Right.
like she like sought to hurt her.
Yeah, I also don't think there's a right choice here that she necessarily does the wrong thing. There may also be an element of wanting to be able to keep an eye on Willow, you know,
Hmm.
Mm, yeah.
and keeping her closer because what's the alternative? Willow gets kicked out of the house and then we trust her completely to sort of take steps in her recovery, which I mean is not realistic. Like,
Yeah.
Right. I mean, they kick Buffy out of the house all the time. Why not? Well,
Speaking of, Charles,
I
you want to
know.
ask the next question?
No, just that was my segue into
That was perfect.
so so between so Dead Man's Party or Empty Places, whichever argument is happening. Jenna, you were called in to mediate the argument. The question was which side that you take, but if you're mediating the argument, you're not really taking sides. But what would you say in that, like, if you were like called in to mediate one of those arguments, what are you saying?
Or if you'd rather take a side and
Or
want
if
to
you
yell
want to
at
take us,
someone.
you could also do that.
so in Dead Man's Party, I don't think there is a side. I think they both
Mhm.
have validity, but the real enemy is the avoidant behavior and the fact that they're not talking to each other about what's going on for them and their own internal thoughts and feelings. And I think that that probably, no, that absolutely should have happened when Buffy got back, because clearly everyone is holding on to things that they're not saying.
Mhm.
And I think Buffy is responding in the best way that she knows how there. She's what, 16, 17,
17, yeah.
17 at that point. So if I were a 17-year-old girl, my coping strategy might also be to run away. That seems like developmentally appropriate to me.
Yeah.
So I think if I were called in to mediate that, my job would really be to tease out that information from everyone. Like, okay, tell me your perspective. What's going on for you? What are you not saying here? And just get everything out into the open, because then at least you can have some sort of understanding, and there's not really a right or wrong party there. Now with the other episode, Empty Places, I think they're all being real jerks to Buffy.
See, this is the way we like you. You back us up. This is how we feel.
Uh, yeah, I think Buffy's in the right there. I mean, okay, she is she is doing the best that she can. She's the leader of an army here, and it's her job to be, I don't know army terms. I was gonna say like principal officer. I don't think that's right. General, lieutenant, whatever. She's the one in charge. She's
Yeah.
making the calls, and okay, maybe if I had been in her shoes, I wouldn't have gone in quite so quickly again as she wanted. But she is proved right in, is it the next episode or,
Yeah, and touched. Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, that, oh yeah, she was right. There was something big there that they were hiding. This weird futuristic looking axe that
Right.
That's bright and shiny from the past, but it's
it's
And that when the others follow their idea and follow the knowledge of the Harbinger, they end up
it's
getting
a
the girls hurt too.
right.
So, you know,
Yeah, it's a trap. And
yeah.
actually, I think Faith is actually less wrong, because I don't know, Faith to me doesn't come off as like really kind of taking one side very strongly.
Hmm.
Mhm.
I think she's so used to following Buffy, especially in the context of that season, where she's like, yeah, I mean, I broke out of prison. I'm just here as like an extra hand. I'll do what you want. And I think she's sort of foisted into this position that she doesn't really want.
Hmm.
Um, but I think everyone else is being a real turd to Buffy.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah,
Yeah.
Faith's role in that whole situation didn't bother me. I felt like she was just trying to do the, do her best in a bad situation that she sort of walked into this hornet's nest that I mean, she and Buffy still have their own stuff to work out, and I think she recognizes that, but she's not jumping on the bandwagon.
And
Um,
it's such a weird thing too, because it's all of these people who, at first, like all of these people who don't know her really,
mhm.
you know, and then like leading this charge that is then backed up by the people who do know her and don't stand up for her. And then Principal Wood out of nowhere is like, well, then we vote. Who are you to say that you have any say in this at all? Sir, who are you? We just met you 3 minutes ago.
I know.
I need you to sit down. You don't get a vote, sir.
Just because your mother was a Slayer.
Right. This is a Slayer only conversation.
Yeah, it's a bunch of ungrateful youths.
Hmm.
gives them a roof over her head. She gives them protection. She starts training them. And how do they repay her? By telling her she's doing a bad job and that actually she should leave her own house.
How dare
Yeah.
they?
Yeah.
How dare they?
I think if Buffy does anything wrong, it's that she should have just pulled the Scoobies together and like gone to the basement and had like told them what the plan was, and then they would like get them on board and then present it to everyone else. But like otherwise, it's all on her
Actually,
friends.
I think if Buffy did anything wrong was leaving the house because I would have been like, "What are
Yeah.
you gonna do? Or make me,
Yeah.
make me.
Hmm.
This is my house. You get out. You go somewhere and see how long you last out there with a Turrican. Go. Bye. Get out. You get out.
Exactly.
You get out.
She needed to pull a Dawn and
Right. Get
just be
out.
like,
Get
get
out.
out, get out, get out. I'm
And
gonna go light my diaries on fire.
right. And Dawn being like, this is my house too. You don't. Come on.
Yeah.
You are not paying mortgage. You
You did not take a fast food service job in order to keep the roof over your head.
right.
This is another instance of where I just think the writing could have done better, that
Hmm.
the writing wasn't good because I don't super buy that every single person was in on kicking Buffy out and not following her lead.
Hmm.
I mean, I understand that everyone is clearly shaken and upset. Xander lost an eye. It's not, something trivial or small. But I don't buy that Giles and Dawn are like, yeah, you should leave. We're gonna follow Faith.
And I think even in them asking her to leave, I don't even think it's necessarily about them wanting to follow Faith. I think it's them wanting to have a different leadership style, which again, and I think Kate and I kind of talked about this because it was like Buffy says, we are forming an army. Like, so
Hmm.
there has to be someone in charge. But what they all want to do is everyone wants to have like an equal say in what's going on. But then as they prove very much like early on in the very beginning, it's like everyone has a different, like as many people are there, everyone has a different idea about what they should do. And then they can't decide on anything. And so Faith has to step in and be like, okay, I'm in charge now because I'm the one with the power. So and we are arguing about how to argue. This is ridiculous. This is what we're going to do. And
Yeah.
it
Yeah,
just goes back to this. So they get this, like, they get the same result. And like you said, Jenna, like, and then they end up in a trap again.
yeah, that's very true. I think as the seasons progress, Buffy more and more is the person that has to make the really hard calls.
Hmm.
And in season 7, more than ever, and that's sort of her whole thing. She's trying to be the detached leader so that she can make the hard calls and lead this army in the fight for their lives. And then they sort of turn around and say, actually, we want this to be a democratic process
Yeah.
and we don't like your call. This call's too hard. We don't like it.
Hmm.
Right.
Yeah. To your point about the writing, Jenna, I think the other thing that really annoys me about that whole scene is they've gone to that well multiple times. It's like every time we get to a certain point, where things are really tough and emotions are running high, then the core Scoobies, fight internally. And it's like, do we really have to go there again?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I Season 7 is probably the season I've watched the least because
Hmm.
I I just wanted it to be better as the last season of the series.
Hmm.
And a lot of the writing feels sort of clunky to me. The storytelling feels clunky, and
Hmm.
that is helping me put words to part of what my problem is with season 7
Mm.
is that every time it's sort of like we don't know where to go with the story. okay, the core Scoobies, they're going to fight and have conflict, and then it sort of spreads out into affecting everything else.
I wonder too if if that fight keeps coming back up again because they've never resolved the issue the first time. Like every
Mm.
time they start to have a conversation about it, something bigger happens, and then they put that aside to face that thing, and then they never go back again to really get rid of the resentment part of the power struggle that they all go through.
Yeah, that's a really good point because that is one of the things that really, in addition just to the scene itself, that ticks me off about Empty Places is the lack of resolution and how they just like come together and they're like, oh, now we like Buffy's idea and let's go down and fight in the Hellmouth. And, oh, we repeat the cute line from, the first episode, oh, the Earth is definitely doomed. And I'm like, yeah, but none of you actually apologized to her. And I was like, she deserves an apology. We deserve to
Right.
see an apology. Like, it didn't have to necessarily be a big thing because, yeah, I get it. You don't have time to deal with this now, as you just spoke to, Charles, but it doesn't mean there couldn't have been like a scene where they apologize. I think she even like starts to kind of stop them. Like, they should have been like, no, we owe you this. We are very sorry. We were wrong. We should have trusted you. We know how good you are and you always win in the end.
Yeah. Yeah, she's owed that much. Yeah.
It's the kind of thing where the more I think about it and the more we tease it out, the angrier I get about it.
100%.
Same,
A
same.
100%. Over the scene is I'm with overall I'm with Charles. Like I wish she had stood up and was like, screw you all. Like this is my house. I'm staying. If you want to leave, fine. But then we wouldn't get, unless everyone did leave and he just came back by himself, we would never get Spike's great speech to her, which I also love. So I'm always like, oh,
Yeah.
I want that, but I also wanted her to stand up to her friend.
Yeah, it's really great. And I also love they have such a tender moment where
Hmm.
he just hold me.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I do like the fact that Spike comes in
Yeah.
and stands up for her and does the thing that Buffy should have done, which
Yeah.
was to kick everybody's ass and be like, "N- oh, this is what you." And he says it so well, like, oh, she saved you, like, you ungrateful
Hmm.
gits. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
She's died for you twice.
Twice.
Yeah.
And save all of them more than once.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is how you treat her. Ugh.
Going into our last question, from your perspective as a therapist, are there any examples of healthy family relationships and or friendships in Buffy, and which ones would you say are? And maybe healthy being a relative term as well.
Yeah, well, I think healthy within the context of the supernatural and the fact
Hmm.
that they have all they have all endured so much trauma.
Hmm.
Um, I I think Buffy and Giles' relationship to me really does seem like a steady, healthy one. I think, like we were talking about before, kind of take out season six Giles,
Hmm.
which doesn't make sense, is out of character for him anyway, and it's just a really consistent relationship. Like the way that he shows up for her and the way that she shows up for him, I think is just so sweet and special um and there's a lot of the typical things that come with a parent child relationship there is the disappointment that she can see in his eyes and the frustration and the like, why won't you just do what I tell you to do? um but all the sort of remarks that Giles says, in the early seasons about her taste in music aside, um, that that one stands out to me. I think this is controversial, but I also like the Buffy Dawn relationship.
Oh, me too. I'm with you.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
Um, it especially while Joyce is still there and
Hmm.
before she dies, it is just so rings so true of a sibling relationship.
Hmm.
Um, I have a younger sister who's about 3 years younger, and it's probably, I think maybe there's a bigger gap between.
I think they're about 5 years technically.
I think
Yeah,
so. Yeah.
yeah, there's a bigger gap between them, but just the sibling dynamic I find really funny and really authentic.
Hmm.
And I also think that's a relationship that matures too from season 5 to 7.
Yeah.
And Dawn really grows into her own when they, finally let her.
Hmm.
Um, I kind of like we talked about before, I really love the Buffy Willow relationship.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Any last thoughts on family and friendships in Buffy the Vampire Slayer?
I'm really glad that you all are dedicating so much time to talking and thinking about it because it's such a tenet of the show of
Hmm.
chosen family and these friendships are the heart of the show. I don't think it would resonate in the same way that it really does if it had purely been, sort of monster of the week, and you didn't have these core relationships at the heart of it.
Definitely agree.
Yeah.
I think that's what really keeps people coming back after all this time and, decades on and new audiences discovering it. Because, I mean, as we've talked about in other episodes of ours, certainly certain aspects of it don't always hold up. It was very much a show of its time in many ways. So, but the core of those relationships really don't change over time because
Mm.
they're so well written, so well acted, and so authentic. It feels like getting together with old friends you hadn't seen in a while, but you just always fit back together so easily.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
good times.
Well, Jenna, thank you so much for joining us again.
Yes.
This was a great conversation. We always appreciate your perspective, both personally, but also, of course, professionally. It helps, really put the show into context. So we're so grateful, and it's been another great conversation.
Well, thank you. It's been an absolute delight.
Thank you
Well,
so much for joining us.
yeah. Yeah, and thank you everyone out there in podcast land for listening to us. We hope you enjoyed this conversation with Jenna as well. And if you want to share your thoughts, we'd love to hear from you. You can email us at abuffypodcast@gmail.com or hit us up on social media. We're on Instagram and Facebook at a Buffy Podcast. And as always, we'd really appreciate it if you could rate, review us. Those help us get new audience members. And if you have a fellow Buffy fan in your life who is not listening and you think they would really enjoy the podcast, please share it with them. We would really appreciate that. And so thank you so much for tuning in.
Bye.
Bye.